Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Values 2021 Summit of 2021, of course. My name is Uthman. I chaired the Y20 during 2020. I'm also a board member of the Generation Connect board of the ITU, and I'm a big fan, of course, of values. I'll be your master of ceremony today, which means that I value two things, time and engagement. And therefore, we are dividing this summit into two sections, the morning section, which finishes around 12:30, and the afternoon section, which finishes around 4:30. So without further ado, let me begin with the morning section, and I'll read you through the agenda before we take you to the first session. So the agenda for today, starting from in 2 minutes actually, the roundtable one will be on solidarity, and there we will discuss the value of solidarity and the Afghanistan stories of solidarity. We will then take a short break, and then we will move back to the roundtable number 2, which we will focus on integrity. Afterwards, there's going to be a launch of an initiative, and then we will have 2 keynotes, and then finally the morning closing session by our lovely chairs for this year. The afternoon session I will read to you later. So without further ado, for the first session, we have the value of solidarity, and it will be moderated by Olena Parrish. The speakers will be, the panelists will be the V20 delegates Fyodor Ovchinnikov, Lena Daouk, and Brett McFarlane. So please jump in.
Hi everyone. Well, welcome to everyone who's joined us in person and online. We're really glad that you could join us. We're really grateful that we're able to have it in person as well. Quick about me, I am a founding member of V20, and this year I was one of the Solidarity Task Force leads with Enrique Carlos de Castro, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, but has really been a major contributor and part of our success this year as the Solidarity Task Force. Quick introduction about what we have worked on this year. So the problems we are facing, as we all know, are becoming increasingly complex. There is no one simple solution to any of the global issues, really. We, as Solidarity, are realizing that it will be essential to create a sense of global solidarity in order to overcome all of these really complicated global challenges and begin addressing those systemic issues that perpetuate the global North-South divide. Global challenges will require global solutions, and only through collective solidarity can we begin to overcome them. These challenges and their consequences aren't going to discriminate. Our planet is telling us, rich or poor, big or small, young or old, we're all going to be affected. Because of this, solidarity will no longer be a value to strive for, but a necessity. Our first speaker today is Fyodor Ovchinnikov. He is the co-founder and director of the Evolutionary Futures Lab and a board member and chair of the Leadership and Organizational Culture committee with the UN Association of the US, San Francisco. Is he on? Ah, hello. There they are.
Yeah. All right. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So
wonderful.
Thank you for joining us. My first question for you today, Fyodor, is what do you mean when you say in your chapter that we need to reimagine policy? Like, why do we need to reimagine policy, and how does it translate into the practice of policy making?
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much, Olena, and a wonderful introduction. Indeed, we are facing increasingly complex global and local challenges. And as you said, there is no one simple solution. If you look at the presidency agenda of the G20 summit, you will see that there is an explicit call for redesigning our fundamental cultures and institutions in order to create a new normal, not to get back to the old normal that we had before the pandemic. In our chapter, we specifically looked at the role of policy. So historically, traditionally, policy normally has been used to modify behavior, to achieve certain predetermined outcome. And that is not a good way to deal with complexity, because complexity involves a lot of uncertainty, and you need really grassroots experimentations, and you need involvement of different stakeholders in order to figure out what the correct behavior or the correct outcome, like a good productive outcome would be. So we cannot just invite a bunch of experts that would design a policy that would lead towards a specific outcome that would be radically better for addressing a complex challenge, right? So that's the fundamental assumption, right? So then we need to change the mindset around policy, from policy as a mechanism of control to policy as enabler of grassroots experimentation that allows new cultures and new institutional structures to emerge. That's the fundamental thing. With that, we basically examine different examples and studies that show why the current view on policy is not quite working for our challenges, and also examples of different new experiments on how policy can be more collaborative and fundamentally enable stakeholders to act. So in order to do that, we recommend, first of all, build the capacity of policymakers and policy analysts to actually understand what it means to work with complexity. Otherwise, we would end up with policymakers designing the same kind of policies that would be controlling rather than enabling. And we can do that through specific educational programs and other activities that would build their capacity. Second thing is that we would like to encourage policymakers to redesign institutional structures that would empower stakeholders to actually take local action at the grassroots level to design these new solutions. They shouldn't just wait for the command from the top. They would need to feel empowered and engaged to do that. And finally, you cannot do that without solidarity, right? Because if you allow for grassroots experimentation, but there is no shared understanding that, for example, we face climate change, which is a global issue, and we all need to work together on solving that issue or addressing that issue, right? So we would have grassroots experimentation that is not coherent. We would lose time. We would not address that in time. So in that case, we need to actually create spaces for dialogue, and the dialogue that would build trust and solidarity and allow grassroots experimentation to be coherent and relevant in the context of our complex challenges. So that's in a nutshell what we are writing about.
Yeah, thank you, Fyodor. It's definitely very relevant. So you mentioned that in your chapter and just then that we need to expand decision makers' capacity to understand and deal with complexities, and that there was a link to solidarity, especially when looking at resources and institutional design. Can you please expand on that briefly?
Sure. So if we basically have institutions that are currently in place and that we just design quick fixes for different symptoms that we see, right? We would not be able to address the fundamental root causes or the conditions, the systemic conditions that keep these challenges in place. Our cultures and institutions created these problems, right? So we need a shift in values. We need to shift in mindsets. And in order to do that, we need to engage people in dialogue, right? So we cannot just tell them what to do, because they would be trying to avoid that. They would still be recreating different solutions and patterns of behavior that got us into where we are in the first place. So we cannot do it in a top-down way, but we can use the power, the systems of power, to actually enable that local action. And that is what policy can do. It doesn't mean that policy is useless or power is useless, is that just we need to abandon power. Power is very useful if it's used to enable rather than control, right? And at the same time, you said, how is it connected to solidarity? Imagine if we enable a lot of stakeholders to take local action, but there is no solidarity, everybody is thinking about their self-interest. Yes, there is climate change, but I would like to buy this land in New Zealand, and I would like to create my own private farm there, and I don't care about the rest of the world. I'm not in solidarity with those affected by climate change in the first place, right? So I want something for me. If in that case, if we allow stakeholders, empower stakeholders to take action, there will be no global solutions, and we would be in big trouble. So while enabling grassroots experimentation and local action, we need to create spaces for dialogue and solidarity. So how do we create solidarity? By building awareness about the challenges we face and potential scenarios, so that people realize that we will not have a collective future unless we act together. And then also creating spaces for dialogue so that people could actually bring their stories in and bring their perspectives and encounter other people's perspectives and build trust, because the solidarity cannot exist without trust. And this is how everything connects to solidarity at the end of the day. And we think that our colleagues that are representing other chapters will be able to give practical examples from the technology field and the care field, how this actually can manifest in more concrete terms in certain areas.
Great, thank you, Fyodor. So leading on from that, I would like to invite our second speaker, Brett McFarlane, who is a champion of digital innovation leadership with over 200 creative awards and patents, and who created the innovation leadership map at INSEAD for the development of innovation leadership practices. So welcome, Brett. In your chapter, you talk about digital solidarity principles. So why are the benefits and obligations of digitization such a difficult topic when addressing values such as solidarity?
Hi, Lena, and thank you for having us here. And this is a real privilege and pleasure to share and discuss this topic, because obviously it's a far-reaching topic. And to your question, software and digitalization of all aspects of 21st century society is hugely complex, as already touched on, and it's dynamic. As software code, the force behind digitalization, it's constantly changing. Lines of code or policy can be written in Boston, Bangalore, Barcelona, and instantly enable or disable functionality globally. This interconnected and digitized 21st century means formerly local issues now have global consequences. However, we still approach digitalization as though it is a tangible asset or a static piece of infrastructure. We engage with individual services and technologies as units of one, rather than starting from the collective value of digital services and their interrelated nature. As a result, despite the great promise of digitalization, we see growing digital divide and increasingly harmful outcomes from digitalization. Now, such challenges and opportunities have been acknowledged by the G20 trade ministers in the 2019 ministerial statement on trade and the digital economy. Yet, and our opportunity is that because there's an absence of a vision for what society wants from digitization, there is an opportunity to take a values-led approach to maximizing the public value of digitalization, fit for the 21st century, which is the first fully digital century.
Great, thank you. So in that case, how can digital discussions address human-centric outcomes?
Well, fantastic question. It's a great build on the capability topic we just covered, and now we start to connect that with practice. Why do we need different capabilities? And this is where we can learn from large distributed global technology companies and best practice in national government digital services. And there's the premise of design principles that are used as a set of values that act as a compass towards the desired outcomes that we want from digitalization. And design principles establish the intent of how we create and use software. Design principles elevate dialogue and policy from individual services and transactional outcomes to societal outcomes of collective benefits and obligations. And to date, there is no digital-specific equivalent of design principles in multilateral forums. Thus, we propose the creation and adoption of digital solidarity principles. Digital solidarity principles are co-developed with members to define and prioritize the values-led desired digital outcomes that we want as a planet, such as security, access, empowerment, dignity, equality, and reward. Outcomes we want on behalf of all citizens enabled by digital technology. And through this common set of principles, we can drive global solidarity. They're dynamic, they evolve with real-world events to maximize public value. And importantly, by design, they accommodate the reality that we may have different priorities in different member states. But the collective set of design principles and digital solidarity principles elevate the overall outcome of digitalization for the benefit of all. Because ultimately, it is a values-led collaborative approach to determine how the benefits and obligations of digitalization are shared fairly by citizens, organizations, and member states. It's a space to have that dialogue. And to conclude, I invite those listening to express support, engage with us to develop the first set of digital solidarity principles in 2022. Because digitalization may be complex, but through digital solidarity principles, we can align dialogue and policy to human-centric outcomes fit for our digital century and build the digital bridges to a prosperous future.
Great, thank you so much, Brett. And our third speaker today is with us in person, Lina Daoudi. She is a tenured professor of work and organizational psychology at the American University of Beirut. She is also a visiting researcher at the Aalto University of Finland and a 2020 Distinguished Scholar from the Arab Fund. So welcome.
Thank you, Alina.
First question, why in your chapter do you and your co-author Lina Lorenza believe that the economy of care should be a key priority for the V20 and broader G20 agenda?
Thank you, Olina. Lorenza and I were very excited to write this chapter because we truly believe that care is a value that is at the center of humanity and societies. We require care from the minute we are born, and we live our life either needing to receive or needing to provide care to others, to our loved ones, to people around us. And that's why this, care is so important for us. And if you look at the COVID-19 and what had happened around the world, we noticed that there's like a huge discrepancy between countries and within countries. And I'm not only talking between the global north and the global south, or between high income and low income countries. I'm talking between and within all of these countries. We found disparities. People did not receive healthcare in the same way. Many people had to pay for private care to receive it. Many did not even receive care at all. There's discrepancies in hospitalization, death rates, etc. There's so much care work that went either underpaid or not paid at all. And all of these put us in a situation that showed inequalities in the care that we received, and this needs to change. So today, the G20 leaders, even though they face a huge challenge in this post-COVID recovery, they also have a golden opportunity to rethink the current economic models that exist, to reimagine them in a different way that positions the value of care at the heart and center of policymaking.
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely very, very relevant. So in your chapter, you mentioned how the care economy is about sustainability. How is that?
So sustainability is multifaceted, and we've seen in the past few years there has been a very strong focus on sustainability, ecological sustainability. And for example, from that perspective, you need to put in mechanisms in order to rectify climate change, in order to minimize exhaustion of resources or extinction of species, etc. In the same way, if we want to ensure that we have social, societal sustainability, we also need to put in place mechanisms that secure that, children, the elderly, the sick people, everyone who needs care can actually have it and have it equally across the world. We need to make sure that we put mechanisms, for example, to decrease maternal and infant mortality rates. And we also need to put in place mechanisms to make sure that all this, the work that women and minority groups, the care work that women and minority groups have carried the burden of, actually decreases in an unpaid manner, and that they can actually get access to more decent work that recognizes the value of the care that they have provided throughout this pandemic. And this is not the last global challenge that we will have that will require care to be at the center of it.
Can you quickly give us one example about how the G20 could address this, and what, an action that you could see is being implemented, to continue promoting the care economy?
Sure, but I'm going to do that in like 3 quick recommendations. So first of all, we need to start changing our attitudes. We need to recognize the value of care work from an economic perspective. That's the first point. The second point is we need to start formalizing care work, especially the care work that has not been valued and paid or underpaid before. So to do that, we need to action policies that start reconciling those existing discrepancies between the formal economy and formal paid work and the unpaid work. And then thirdly, we also need to start investing more heavily in robust health and social security systems. And we have existing models around the world that proved to be successful in that model.
Amazing, thank you so much. So as we've just heard, our task force presents 3 chapters that address the importance of solidarity in our world. From Theodore, we have heard how cultural values can facilitate the success of policies and in turn contribute to positively transforming our society by reimagining policy as a driver for this. From Brett, we have heard about how the creation and adoption of digital solidarity principles can minimize technological disparities, especially when we're thinking about improving access to digitization. And lastly, from Lena, we heard about the very relevant, given the pandemic that we're currently living through, about the importance and value of care and creating a care economy in a pandemic and a post-pandemic world. These 3 chapters have corresponded to each of the 3 G20 2021 priority areas of planet, prosperity, and people, respectively. I want to finish with a quick poem by a Brazilian poet, Mario Denitara. Apologies, I butchered that. This was shared by Enrique, our co-lead. If things are unattainable, well, that's no reason to not want them. How sad the paths, if not for the distant presence of stars. I guess we found this relevant because it can sometimes seem that initiatives like the V20 and achieving these values-based, human-centric policy can be unattainable given competing priorities and different needs of member states. It can sometimes seem that values-based change is a combination of policy, of action by decision makers and by populations, and sheer luck of right time, right place. We would like to argue that we don't need luck, but instead we need intelligent and bold initiatives like the V20. We have no reason to fight with good or bad luck when we're making these changes. Instead, we need real, effective, and achievable change. We've proposed some solutions today, and I believe very strongly that V20 is a great way to do this. After all, here, we're not working with luck. Instead, we're working with values and beliefs, right? So I would like to challenge that.
Thank